Good evening and welcome along to MesmePolitics. It's just gone 7 p.m. on Wednesday, the 3rd of March, 2021. My name's Toby Lepati Mesme and welcome along to a special. That's right, this is a MesmePolitics special for the next half hour, all about Budget 2021. Dishy Rishi, the sequel. Welcome along to a MesmePolitics special. You can get in touch in the chat at any point, or indeed get in touch via email, tobyjoshua2004@gmail.com. We're going to be taking you right through the fiscal interventions for the next year of the Chancellor. All from a unique leftist perspective, as we always do, bringing you all the latest in UK and US politics from a unique leftist perspective. So thank you for joining us for another edition. You can get in touch, as I say, at any point, and please do give us your thoughts. We'll go through some of the key measures and announcements taken in the budget. First of all, furlough. Unemployment will peak at 6.5%, down from the forecasted peak of 11.9% last July. 1.8 million fewer people are expected to be out of work than previously thought. It will be extended until the end of September. Employees will continue to receive 80% of their wages until the scheme ends, but the firms will be asked to contribute 10% in July and 20% in August and September as it is phased out. There will be a fourth self-employment grant to cover February and April, worth 80% of average trading profits, and the £20 a week increase in universal credit is very much alive and well for 6 more months. There's going to be a £5 billion restart grant for businesses to help companies get going after lockdown. Total cash support to businesses has reached £25 billion. There'll be government-backed bounce-back loan and coronavirus. As those the bounce-back loans and the business interruption loans come to an end, Treasury is launching a new loan scheme. Loans can be between £25,000 and £10 million and run until the end of the year. There'll be a 5% reduced rate of VAT extended until the end of September. It'll be increased to 12.5% for 6 months before returning to the standard rate from April 2022. That's worth £5 billion, that cut. And hospitality and leisure will pay no business rates for 3 months and a £6 billion cut. Because rates will be discounted for the remaining 9 months of the year by 2/3. Stamp duty holiday will be extended. It will taper off gradually to usual levels from the 1st of October. There'll be a mortgage guarantee to help first-time buyers access 95% mortgages, which is essentially, as far as I can garner, a policy that was implemented under David Cameron and didn't do very much. Total COVID support will be £352 billion. The deficit will be $355 billion this year, and we're going to be seeing a freeze of personal tax thresholds. We're going to see an inheritance tax threshold, pensions, lifetime allowance, annual exempt allowance from capital gains, all frozen, and we're going to see corporation tax increase to 25%, with duties on alcohol and fuel frozen. 12 billion capitalisation from the government in a new national infrastructure bank in Leeds. They'll be levelling up, free ports, new town deals, and the Treasury moving up to Darlington. A campus is moving up to Darlington. Here is Rishi Sunak in the House of Commons announcing his budget.
I said I would do whatever it takes. I have done, and I will do so. The furlough extended to September. Self-employed grants extended to September. Universal credit uplift extended to September. More money to tackle domestic violence. Bigger incentives to hire apprentices. Higher grants to struggling businesses. Extra funds for culture, arts and sport. New loan schemes to finance businesses. Kickstart, restart, a lifetime skills guarantee. Business rates cut. VAT cut, stamp duty cut, and a new mortgage guarantee, the first part of a budget that protects the jobs and livelihoods of the British people. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, as you can see, we're going long, extending our support well beyond the end of the roadmap. At this budget, we are announcing an additional £65 billion of measures over this year and next to support the economy in response to coronavirus. The amount we've borrowed is comparable only with the amount we borrowed during the 2 world wars. It's going to be the work of many governments over many decades to pay it back. Just as it would be irresponsible to withdraw support too soon, it would also be irresponsible to allow our future borrowing and debt to rise unchecked. I see old industrial sites being used to capture and store carbon, vaccines being manufactured, offshore wind turbines creating clean energy for the rest of the country, all located within a free port with a treasury just down the road and a UK infrastructure bank only an hour away. I see innovative, fast-growing businesses hiring local people into decent, well-paid green jobs. I see people designing, manufacturing and exporting incredible new products and services. I see people putting down roots in places they are proud to call home. I see a people optimistic and ambitious for their future. That, Madam Deputy Speaker, is the future economy of this country.
After 11...
So, I think one of the biggest takeaways is that the approach of not Singapore-on-Thames, more a, higher tax, more state intervention, basically larger government sort of economy is here to stay now, okay? The austerity consensus, in many ways, the neoliberal consensus is coming apart at the seams. The Tories know that these things will help them stay in power, and they're going to do it. This is a big political moment for Sunak. Absolute shameless self-promotion by Mr. Sunak, his own personal brand. In many ways, you could see this as a leadership bid and a pitch to be the next Prime Minister. It's working. He is the most popular Chancellor since 1978. The most popular Chancellor since 1978. And he's got away with, people keep saying, oh, he'll do something unpopular. Will he really? He got away with the out to help out. And by the way, right, if any unpopular decisions have to be made, it can be framed through the language of solidarity, and people will be fine with it. Unless he does something really horrific and makes Tories the nasty party again, he's not going to do that. That would be the only scenario where it would tip in the other direction. 25%, even with all the caveats they put in, is a bold and big increase in corporation tax. It's the right thing to do. It will raise billions for the Treasury. There's been an absence of a wealth tax or a windfall profits tax or any of those sort of things. We did need to see that. We saw it couched in the language of fairness. That weirdly, the media and the Labour Party are basically trying to push the Tories back to the right on this. But it's right, and it's good, and it's only 1 point off what a Jeremy Corbyn government would have raised it to. I think another thing we see is that those that are irrelevant electorally to the Tories, constituencies that won't vote for them, like the 3 million excluded, are getting absolutely shafted. They've been ignored. This budget basically spat in their faces. And this government is perfectly happy to let some of the most vulnerable in our society suffer as long as it doesn't hurt them politically. If they needed their votes, they'd be doing otherwise, as they are handing lavish subsidies out to places like Darlington. John McDonnell's ideas were stolen again throughout this budget. Free ports were probably the only thing that weren't stolen from John McDonnell. We even heard a little bit of something that sounded a bit like Keir Starmer's recovery bond idea. The Tories are undertaking a more interventionist state in order to reshape the economy in the interests of the 1% and secure political hegemony in the next decade. It is well underway. It's working. Expect a big boost after this budget in the polls for the Tories. A big, we've got the vaccine boost. We'll have the unlocking boost. We're about to get the budget boost, because this was very much a populist budget looking to the country, not looking to what is immediately the right thing to do. I heard it described as this by a Times journalist, this was a Labour UKIP budget. This is the sort of budget that, and this was what I saw mentioned on Twitter. I can't remember who said it, but it was a prominent journalist. So I don't claim it for myself. Wish I had come up with it. If Labour had won an election in 2015 and then Brexit had happened, this is the sort of budget we'd see. It would be a Labour UKIP coalition budget. This is basically what we'd see. Free ports are a race to the bottom measure. They won't help. They won't create jobs. They'll just suck jobs in from elsewhere. That's not great. Giveaways to the Red Wall are going to be highly effective. Subsidies to the Red Wall, going to be highly effective. I don't think the Tories are serious about rebalancing economic power in the country on class lines. However, they will make sure that the voters they need, wealthy homeowners in the north, they will get them, keep them on side, bring them into the blue tent. I have concern about the rhetoric of the Chancellor on the public finances. Of course it's to be expected, because at heart, Rishi Sunak is a Thatcherite. Underneath all of this, he is. Some of the giveaways to business, in terms of the 130% reduction if you invest, is worrying. I don't know how efficient that'll be and how targeted. It looks like there'll be a load of bloated dead weight in that. Also, propping up the housing bubble yet further. It's £1 trillion bubble that is absolutely useless, adds nothing to the economy. We are asking for another collapse by continually inflating the housing bubble and not actually proposing. No, we hear, we'll turn generation rent into generation buy. But we don't actually have any policies that would even get us close. Wouldn't even get us 1% of the way to turning generation rent into generation buy. Young people continue to be shafted by this government with the disastrous kickstart scheme. There's nothing for young people, particularly in this budget. Public sector workers get the shaft. Schools get the shaft. Not much talk about schools, and there will be money going out. Even Laura Kuenssberg mentioned it. Money going out of various government departments over time to the tune of millions. So it is not, the effects of austerity are still there, particularly at a local level. People are going to get absolutely hammered with council tax increases. But for the government politically, this was a coup de grace, and it paid off. What did the opposition have to say on all this? Well, here's Keir Starmer in the House of Commons opposing the government.
After the decisions of the last year and the decade of neglect, we needed a budget to fix the foundations of our economy, to reward our key workers, to protect the NHS and to build a more secure and prosperous economy for the future. Instead, what we got was a budget that papered over the cracks rather than rebuilding the foundations. A budget that shows the government doesn't understand what went wrong in the last decade or what's needed in the next. The Chancellor may think that this is time for a victory lap, but I'm afraid this budget won't feel so good for the millions of key workers who are having their pay frozen, for the businesses swamped by debt, and the families paying more in council tax, and the millions of people who are out of work or worried about losing their job. Whatever spin the Chancellor tries to put on the figures today, as a result of his decisions, we've suffered deeper economic damage and much worse outcomes. And Madam Deputy Speaker, that is nothing compared with the decade of political choices that meant that Britain went into this crisis with an economy built on insecurity and inequality. The Chancellor referred to the last 10 years. We've got an economy as a result of those 10 years with 3.6 million people in insecure work, where wages stagnated for a decade, over 4 million children living in poverty. And critically, we went into this crisis with 100,000 unfilled posts in the NHS, and where social care was ignored and underfunded for a decade.
That's Keir Starmer there, so what do we make of it? Well, what he said, still politically illiterate in running against David Cameron. He's running against David Cameron. He's running against, Osborne and Cameron and the sort of austerity years, not reckoning with the transformation that has occurred within the Tory party, that circumstances have meant they have shifted from the small state mindset. Meaning, essentially, every time they say the Tories are going to cut this, Tories are going to do this, then they don't do it, makes the Tories look even better, makes Labour, look more and more discredited. A new look for Keir Starmer, glasses, made him look older, a bit more distinguished. Just thought I'd throw that in. I think they probably suit him. I always think glasses suit older male politicians. I don't know why, I just do. standard oppositional statement. He sounded like a run-of-the-mill leader of the opposition, right? But where is that oven-ready alternative? When Jeremy Corbyn stood up and just critiqued the government, you knew behind him were an arsenal of people-made, people-powered radical policies for any area. You ask any little area, he'd know what the policy was and what he would do. Here, Keir Starmer doesn't know what he'd do, even on the biggest questions of the day. He's ambiguous on things like Brexit. He's completely missing in action on things like progressive taxation. And on ownership of key industries, he runs out of the room. He said the government continues with its old free market approach, and they're not. So what are you talking about? Who are you talking to? Absolutely ludicrous. I mean, it was good to see some fire, good to see some proper opposition. It was, standard leader of the opposition. It wasn't, Sir Keir sucks off the establishment Starmer for once. But still, it wasn't. It was pretty dire, in the sense that there wasn't really anything where you'd look at it and go, "Oh yes, this is that they're really diagnosing the problems. They have a strategy to deal with them." Let's hear Annalisa Dodds being asked about Keir Starmer's 10 pledges. The answer might surprise you. This was on Politics Live earlier today.
Keir Starmer was running to be Labour leader, a year ago, and he had 10 key pledges. That was his campaign platform, and it included a radical economic policy. It was similar, actually, to the economic platform pursued by Jeremy Corbyn, and we had your predecessor on earlier in the programme, John McDonnell, when they were running the Labour Party. Is Keir Starmer still committed to actually putting in place those 10 pledges?
Well, absolutely. And in fact, you may have heard Keir's speech earlier where he set out what's needed now is a recognition of the fact that over the last 10 years, we've had an economy that simply hasn't worked for huge numbers of people. The foundations of our economy have been weakened over and over again. We entered this crisis with a quarter of UK families not even having £100 in the bank. Yes. And Keir is absolutely determined to tackle those questions.
But if he is committed to those questions and the similar economic platform that was outlined in those 10 key pledges, you've said that Labour has changed and that Labour is under new leadership. Well, then what's changed if he's still running on that very similar economic platform?
Well, we're talking about a new partnership between Labour and business. And I have to say, when I talk to businesses up and down the country, they're very concerned about what's been happening during this crisis and before it as well. They're concerned about the fact that we've seen 600,000 more kids pushed into poverty over the last 10 years. They want to do something about it. They want to be supporting communities and building back much more strongly and securely, and indeed in a more green way into the future too. So I don't think that this is about pitting, for example, Labour's new partnership with business against having a transformative agenda. They're absolutely the same thing.
Very interesting. And I feel quite vindicated here. And what this tells us, it's a big moment from Annalise Dodds here. And I think it reflects, underlyingly, it doesn't tell us anything about the direction of the Labour Party or Labour Party policy. What it does tell us is her intrinsic progressive instincts. Instinctively says, yes, we're on with the 10 pledges for a radical overhaul of the taxation system and the fundamental reshaping of the British economy. And that goes hand in hand with talking about things like partnership with business. That's right. I agree with that. That was the Corbyn-McDonnell approach. However, that's not what many of her colleagues share. That's not the feeling many of her colleagues share. It does make me even more certain they're going to try and get rid of her. Makes me even more certain her position needs to be defended. The left should mobilise around defending her position, because believe me, you've got a much better chance of getting Annalise Dodds to come out with progressive policy more than Rachel Reeves, and I think she wants to say a lot more, and she's being muzzled on it. It's being muzzled by the shadow cabinet, by Keir Starmer, because they are too terrified, too petrified to unveil any progressive policies. It's either a complete lie or a misinterpretation here, or they're just that shockingly cautious that they do intend to do some of these things, and they just are so scared they won't say it until election time. Makes no sense. Either way, one or the other, it's bad politics. It's just plain bad politics. Tone deaf, ideologically, skewed, mind-numbingly dull politics. So what should the alternative be? What should we be looking at? John McDonnell was on Talk Radio today with Ian Collins. I know it's a very right-wing station, talking about Rishi Sunak and criticising him for nicking his budget ideas. Have a listen.
Let's speak to John McDonnell, former Shadow Chancellor of the Exchequer. John McDonnell, afternoon to you. Has he done what it takes to support business and people?
No, it's disappointing. The rhetoric sounded pretty good, but go behind the reality, it's not looking good. I always say, the bigger the applause on the day, the bigger the disappointment by the weekend. I think there's already quite a bit of disappointing. On the income tax side, let's go through them just for ordinary working people. Let's just take that perspective.
Sure.
They'll be hit by an income tax rise as the thresholds are frozen. They'll be hit by a council tax rise. I was hoping he was going to knock that one out, but he hasn't. There's going to be a pay freeze for the public sector workers. So austerity is back for most of them. And then you have the cliff edge cut in universal credit in a few months down the line. And I was really disappointed. I thought we'd convinced him about legacy benefits. These are largely disabled people who never even got the additional £20. There was no mention of them, so they will be excluded from it all. And we've been campaigning since last April, actually, when he announced the furlough scheme, which was one of my ideas. I said then I was worried about the number of people who were excluded from the small business support and the self-employed support and the furlough. And the calculation is about 3 billion, a lot of them freelancers, people like that. He's included 600,000 is the calculation he made today. But actually that leaves about another 2 million still excluded for any forms of support. So just from an ordinary working people's perspective, although there was big announcements around support for businesses, etc., there wasn't an awful lot to lift people out of the immediate problems that they're facing. And I have to say also, he said, I thought he was going to do something around rental debt as well, because we're finding, if you're a constituency MP like me in my community where I live, we're facing a housing crisis with high levels of rental debt that have built up over the pandemic and mortgage debt. I was hoping he was going to do something on that, but he didn't. So from just an ordinary person's perspective, big noise, lots of announcements, are actually not an awful lot of assistance.
But
so
he's extending furlough, John, till September. This is costing billions of pounds. I mean, no chancellor has ever looked after working people in this way, you could argue.
Well, because we're in a crisis, you have to. There's no other option. But the problem
he could have stopped it sooner, couldn't he? He could have said it's only going to July.
He tried to do that, and he wouldn't have politically survived. You know that, because look at what happened last year when he tried to pull back from it and get employers to pay more. He misjudged it completely, and we were getting job losses announced in advance of the date for when he's set to change the scheme, and he had to pull back. And I think he may have to do that this time as well. My view of the furlough scheme is actually the problem is that two things, really. I think he should have made this decision ages ago, and he could have done. I'm disappointed in him because I think he's played a lot of politics with this. He could have made the announcements about extending furlough and universal credit a couple of months ago, and it would have relieved people from an awful lot of stress that they've been under. But also on the furlough scheme, as soon as you start unwinding that, I think we are going to be facing job losses, and I'd rather he extended the furlough for a longer period of time. I know that costs more, but at the end of the day, it's better.
So, we're back to that point. There's very much an intellectual vacuum politically. Both major parties are not coming up with new ideas. One's nicking the other's old ideas because they won't have them anymore. The Everton window is tipping back towards the right. We're back to the old days of unofficial left budgets, right? Gone are the days of John McDonnell at the dispatch box. We're back to the days of John McDonnell on the backbenches and the rest of us basically shouting into the wind, desperately trying to secure some sort of win somewhere for the working class in the midst of two corporate-backed sellout parties. What would an alternative budget look like? What would a budget that I would advocate look like, or anyone on the left, such as me, any of my comrades, would look like? Well, in terms of taxation, I would put At the end of this year, corporation tax, so it is a tax on profits, up to 23%. By the end of the Parliament, up to 28%, still positioning us below Germany, which is an eminently prosperous economy. I think over the course of the Parliament, initially, I would put the top 5% of earners at the end of the year on an income tax rate of 50%. They have billions and billions in savings. The top 2%, by the end of the Parliament, a 55% tax rate, with a 35% charge on people moving wealth out of the country or moving companies out of the country if they do business here, or assets, 35% charge, legally enforceable. I would look at we've already done corporation tax. Business rates, business rate relief. I want extended semi-permanently for small and medium enterprises. I want to look at debt forgiveness for small and medium enterprises, and I want to, over the course of the Parliament, foster a minimum living wage of £20 an hour, with support and subsidies from the government for small and medium enterprises that can't do it. And I want a 10 billion pot of loans, grants for cooperative and small business local startups in the community that are paying good wages, creating good jobs, in partnership with the public sector. In terms of investment, I want to see a 100 billion people stimulus package that passed soon, basically to kickstart the economy. Lots of green stimulus in there. I think we really have to look at things like that. I think we also need a national investment bank, and we need investment banks right across the country. 400 billion in capital green investment to kickstart a green industrial revolution. In terms of industry, we need consultations on what industries should be taken into public ownership. We should begin with rail, mail, water and broadband over the course of this Parliament, in the case of rail, mail, water and energy, of course, and then over the course of the next 10 years, look at full fibre broadband. We need to invest in our economy. We should not be looking at the deficit clock as the arbiter of what we do. We should be looking at tangibly transforming, using this moment when we're at a low ebb, to transform our economy in the interests of working people. And in the process of doing that, we will grow our economy, we will absorb any demand shock left over from Brexit, and of course, we will be able to, if you're worried about things like debt and things like that, they will become less and less relevant. They will shrink as the economy grows. Deirdre says, pay freeze off public sector. Indeed, we need a living wage and a raise for anyone working in the NHS, much more substantial pay rise, and for all public sector workers, we need, a backlog of pay rises, considering it's been frozen for 10 years. That is just the start of some of the ideas that we could put right now into an alternative budget. I think, it's very important on the left that we start thinking about what we would do, what would the intellectual thrust be of a people's budget, because sometime in the next 10, 20, 25 years, standing up at the dispatch box will be a left-wing Chancellor of the Exchequer, a socialist Chancellor of the Exchequer. I don't know when it will be, but we are on a collision course with that, and when that date comes, we still need to be hot for ideas. We don't want what happened with the right of the Labour Party to now happen with the left, where we run out of ideas just snipe from the sidelines. We need all the ideas, so the minute we have a chance, we have so much infrastructure, so many ideas, that we can overcome things in the way the Corbyn project couldn't. And just a call out to the BBC, who've basically been producing pro-Sunak propaganda all day. That makes me more than anything else sure that he's heading for the Premiership. No one's stopping him. And it's very concerning, and once he's got the reign of power, God knows what happens. Thank you for listening. We will be back. MesmePolitics will be back tomorrow for a usual show. Same time, same place. Tomorrow from 7 p.m. Please subscribe, turn notifications on, tell your friends. You're up to date with all the latest in UK and US politics from a unique leftist perspective. And join us tomorrow for why Keir Starmer is unfit to be Prime Minister of this country.